We are more so now after our first independence campaign. More so now we're hearing this almost antagonistic language of the British state, even as, you know, as a phrase in itself, as a discrete phrase. What does that mean? What is the British state?
I'm a bit dubious about your use of the word antagonistic. I don't see it as antagonistic at all. It's simply a statement of the political reality. There is a British state, and the British state is, in political terms, our adversary. The British state does not serve our interests. What is the British state? Well, Britain is not a country. Britain, the British state, is, as I said a moment ago, those structures of power and privilege and patronage which define the British state. It is a system. It's a system for exercising and maintaining power, established power, conventional power. And it does not serve our interests. It has never served our interests. The Union has never served our interests. It is now, we have now reached a situation where the Union is actually detrimental to our interests, seriously detrimental to our interests. Brexit has, in a way, brought this to a head. And it clearly demonstrates, it openly demonstrates how the Union is detrimental to Scotland's economic interests. Brexit is being imposed on us against our democratic will, and it will be very damaging. I don't think anybody has any doubts. A few people have fantasies, but nobody has any doubts about how economically damaging it will be. But it is also detrimental to our democracy. The whole Brexit thing is a denial of democracy. We voted against it. Scotland is a nation and we voted to remain in the EU. That is our democratic choice. That is the democratic will of Scotland's people, and that is being denied. And that's being denied because of the Union. It is the Union that facilitates that denial. So the Union is both democratically and economically detrimental to Scotland. Therefore, it must be dissolved. It's like any other form of association, any other relationship. If it becomes detrimental to either or any of the parties to that relationship or that association, you either amend the relationship or you end it. Mm-hmm. We've had enough amending. All the constitutional tinkering of Smith commissions and Calman commissions and Scotland Acts and all the rest of it. We're done with that. We're done with the constitutional tinkering, and more tellingly, the British state is not done with the constitutional tinkering. But all they're doing now is they have decided that Scotland and Scotland's democratically elected representatives will no longer play any role in this constitutional tinkering. It will be done unilaterally. The British state will decide what are going to be the UK-wide common frameworks, as Mundell's phrase was, and we will simply have no say in the matter. So we have to assume that these frameworks are not going to be to our benefit, that they're going to be detrimental to us. We have to assume that. Both because of the record of the British state and what is done to Scotland, Scotland's economy, etc., and from what they're actually saying they intend to do. We can't afford to assume that the British state is all of a sudden going to become this beneficent entity looking after Scotland's interests. That's just not the way they work.
Well, we're here, you know, largely because we are actors within the independence movement. And as viewers and participants within the movement, what I would, I suppose, like to see in terms of a forecast is the object of our movement is independence. But in a worst case scenario, certainly for the next 5 or 10 years, if that doesn't happen, what's the prognosis for Scotland?
Dire. Yeah, I really can't see. I don't like to sound scaremongering, but I really do see a dire future. If we do not secure independence very soon, we're looking at being subsumed into this new one nation British state that is the dream of one nation British nationalists, and that is not a prospect that I can look at with anything other than fear and trepidation. I'm really worried about Scotland's future. What we would see in practical terms is a rolling back. We have made considerable progress in many areas, certainly relative to the rest of the UK. Healthcare, for example, we've made a certain amount of progress in the last 30 years because of devolution, because of the way devolution has operated, not the way it was intended to, but it's actually operated to our advantage. So all of that is going to be rolled back. When they talk about common frameworks, they're talking about common frameworks in everything. It won't just apply in certain areas such as farming and fisheries, food standards, or I mean, that would be bad enough. That in itself would be pretty bad. But if you consider the prospect, not to put it too finely, of the NHS Scotland being eradicated and merged with NHS and the rest of the UK, and everything brought down to a standard. We know how things aren't going well with healthcare in England, NHS in England, and there will be a dragging down to standards. I'm trying desperately, if I sound hesitant here, it's because I'm trying desperately not to overstate things. But at the same time, I don't want to underplay it. It will be serious. That is their ambition. I mean, it's all in the language. The UK-wide common framework, and David Liddington's stuff about not tolerating any discrepancies among the 4 nations of the UK. What else can that mean but this common framework? Theresa May's reference when she said that we will not allow anything to damage our precious union. Now she's talking about her precious union. It's not precious to us, it's precious to her and British nationalists. And it is their project is this creation of this one nation state, Britain, which will be under direct rule from Westminster. We will have a token shadow government, which is already in the process of being created in the Scotland office. And we'll basically be told, as powers are shifted away from the Scottish Parliament to the Scotland office, in a process which they will call rationalisation, and we will be told, oh, that's not powers being taken away from Scotland because they're going to the Scotland office and it has Scotland in it, so it must be Scottish. That's what I foresee, and where that leads, well, people will have to use their imaginations if we're talking 5-10 years down the line. But if you think in terms of what will happen to our health service if this one nation project goes ahead, if we don't stop it, it will go ahead if we don't stop it. We have to stop it.
One of my fears is that if Brexit becomes a reality for Scotland, if we don't push the ejector button and we go down the Brexit highway, that our Parliament, our devolved Parliament in Edinburgh, is in serious trouble. I don't want to be too pessimistic, and I don't want to put words in your mouth either, but you know, just to echo what you've said. On Friday, there is the Hands Off Our Parliament demonstration at Holyrood in Edinburgh, and I think you're going to be there as one of the front guard. So would you like to tell us something about... I'm only putting that to you.
I will certainly be there, and I think I'm right in saying I've been asked to speak, although that's not important. It's being there that is important, and that is important for all of us.
What time's kick-off?
I believe it kicks off. I'm not one of the organisers of this, so I'm possibly the wrong person to ask, but I believe it kicks off at 10 a.m.
So it's certainly important for everyone who can be there to be there.
Oh, absolutely. This is probably the most important demonstration. This is more important even than the Indie marches, the Yes marches, because this is our Parliament that's under threat, and that Parliament belongs to all the people of Scotland. Whether you're pro-independence, anti-independence or undecided, that is your Parliament. That is the Parliament that you elected. That is the only Parliament which has actual democratic legitimacy in Scotland. It is the only Parliament that is democratically authorised to legislate for Scotland. It is the only Parliament which speaks for Scotland. And it is under threat. There is absolutely no doubt about that. It is under threat.
When you say threat, what do you mean? Can it be closed up?
It could, under the terms of the Scotland Act. Well, we know this because yet again they've told us. When I say they, I mean the British state, the British establishment. The Smith Commission recommended that a legislation be enacted to make the Scottish Parliament permanent. And as we know, that was rejected. That was rejected both by the British government and by the UK Supreme Court. The Scottish Parliament is not permanent. It exists at the whim of Westminster, which means basically at the whim of the British executive, the British government. In principle, yes, they could simply close down the Scottish Parliament, and that's a worst case scenario. Not from their point of view, that's a best case scenario. I don't think they'll actually do that, but there will. The so-called power grab of powers being repatriated. I'm uncomfortable with that word as well, but powers being returned from Brussels. The Westminster power grab. That is important in itself. For the powers, 111 powers or whatever that are being seized. But it's more important for the principle that it establishes, the precedent that it establishes. And it won't end there. Now, why would they grab these powers in the first place if they didn't intend to keep them? And if they intend to keep them, then if they want those powers, then they also want others, and they will get them because there is nothing to stop them, because they have awarded themselves through the tame Parliament. They've awarded themselves the authority to unilaterally rewrite the devolution settlement. That is what they're in the process of doing at the moment. When it's the constitutional implications of Brexit, which are now becoming clear, and now happily Scottish ministers are openly talking about. When Scotland leaves the EU, when the UK leaves the EU, the UK will be constitutionally redefined. It will become a different constitutional entity. There will be this constitutional redefinition. Scotland and the other devolved parliaments have been kept out of this whole process. That clique in London have kept to themselves kept tight control over this whole process of the constitutional change. There is no meaningful input from Scotland's elected representatives or Wales, or none. May and the clique around her have kept that to themselves. So that is the principle that has now been established, that they can rewrite the devolution settlement as part of this redefinition of the UK, and that means redefining Scotland's status within the UK. Redefining Scotland's status within the UK. That's a worrying phrase. That's a very worrying phrase. It becomes positively frightening when you realise it's a redefining of Scotland's status within the UK without any say from the people of Scotland or our elected representatives. We have no say in that at all. The UK government, the British government, will redefine our status within the UK without our consent, without our involvement, without our consultation, without our democratic mandate. They will just do it. It will then be presented as a fait accompli, and we'll be told, no, that's just the way things are. Accept it.
You make it sound like a creeping direct rule.
It is. It's not all that creeping. I mean, they're not even bothering to conceal it anymore. They are so convinced. If they can convince themselves that they can somehow take the whole UK out of the EU without any unfortunate consequences, and it somehow be a successful Brexit. What could that possibly look like? If they are convinced that they have the power and the ability to do that, then why should they not think that they have the power and the ability to deny this wave of democratic dissent that has risen in Scotland? It is our very democracy which is under threat.